Captain Valeria Val Stone stood on the platform, her heart pounding in her chest as the massive looming structure of the Shervan court stretched above her. The air was thick with tension, the kind that made her skin prickle and her thoughts race. The Shervans, an advanced alien species, had invited humanity to their homeworld for a test that would determine if humans could stand as equals among the galactic powers. The stakes could not have been higher. If they failed, humanity's place in the galaxy would be nothing more than that of a servant race. Confined to the edges of space, forever under the thumb of the Shervans, Val had spent her entire military career fighting for humanity's survival. But this was different. This was a battle of minds, not weapons. And she, Captain Val Stone, was humanity's only hope. The grand hall of the Shervan court was unlike anything Val had ever seen. Towering columns stretched high into the air, their surfaces carved with intricate symbols that told stories of a civilization far older than Earth. The Shervans were a proud, ancient race, and their court was a place of great power, where decisions were made that affected not only their world but countless others across the stars. But there was something about the Shervans' power that unsettled Val. Their ways were strange, their customs confusing, and now she was about to take part in one of their most important rituals. Her gaze swept over the gathered crowd. Alien faces of every shape and size watched her intently. The Shervans were known for their strict matriarchal society, and it was the young females who held the most authority. They came of age with a series of trials, and only after proving their strength and wisdom were they allowed to ascend to positions of true power. The leader of the Shervan court, the supreme matron, was a young female who had earned her position through fierce competition. She was powerful. She was watching Val with a gaze that could freeze the blood in one's veins. Val had been chosen to represent humanity in this trial because of her leadership skills. She had faced war, betrayal, and countless life-threatening situations. But none of it had prepared her for what lay ahead. The Shervans had presented her with an offer: participate in a ritual that was central to their culture. A ceremony that involved not only diplomatic exchange, but a test of strength and intelligence. To fail would mean disgrace for her and for humanity. Captain Valeria Stone of Earth, the voice of the Supreme Matron, echoed across the hall. It was soft, yet carried an authority that demanded respect. You stand here today as humanity's representative, ready to prove your species' worthiness in the galaxy. The path ahead will not be easy. You must pass 3 trials, each more difficult than the last. Only by overcoming these trials will you earn your place at the galactic table. Val nodded, her mind racing. She knew what was at stake. This wasn't just about her. It was about every human who had ever fought for survival on Earth. This was humanity's chance to prove that they were not a primitive race. Not just another species to be dismissed by the powerful civilizations that ruled the stars. No, they were more than that. They were resilient. They were capable. And Val was determined to show the Shervans just how far humanity could go. The first trial began immediately. A large, circular platform rose from the center of the room, surrounded by a ring of alien spectators. Val stepped forward, her boots echoing on the stone floor. As she approached the platform, a voice in her ear, a translator provided by the Shervans, informed her of the rules. The trial you are about to face is known as the Combat of Wits, the voice explained. You will be paired with one of our brightest minds. It is a battle of intelligence, strategy, and reasoning. The rules are simple. Outthink your opponent and you win. Fail, and you will be disqualified from the ceremony. Val's heart skipped a beat. The thought of facing off against an alien intellect was daunting, but she had trained for moments like this. Her military career had honed her ability to think on her feet, to adapt to any situation. But this was unlike anything she had ever encountered. She stepped onto the platform, and the alien she was to face in the trial appeared before her. It was a Shervan female, young but with an intensity in her eyes that made Val's pulse race. The Shervan's skin was a deep, shimmering blue, and her long, flowing hair seemed to move on its own, as if alive. She was tall, taller than Val by a few inches, and she exuded an air of calm confidence that was almost unnerving. "I am Lyra," the Shervin introduced herself. "You may have the advantage of being human, but I assure you, Captain, I am not one to be underestimated." Val took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm not here to be underestimated," she replied. The platform beneath their feet shifted. A series of holographic screens flickered to life in front of them. The rules of the trial were clear. Each participant would be given a puzzle, a problem to solve. Whoever solved it first would be declared the winner. Lyra's first puzzle appeared a series of complex patterns and numbers that Val could barely make sense of. It was like staring at a page of alien symbols. The Shervin's eyes gleamed as she quickly began to manipulate the holographic images. Solving the puzzle with ease, Val's mind raced. She was not as quick as Lyra, but she didn't need to be. Her strength was in her ability to think through problems, to look for patterns others might miss. She closed her eyes for a moment, focusing on the puzzle. And then it clicked. There was a pattern hidden in the numbers, a sequence that, when connected, revealed the solution. She reached out, pressing the correct sequence of buttons. The puzzle solved itself. She had done it. But the Shervin had already moved on to the next one, her confidence unwavering. The trial continued like this, with each puzzle more difficult than the last. Val was challenged mentally in ways she had never imagined, but with each victory, she grew more confident. It wasn't just about solving the puzzles. It was about showing the Shervins that humanity's greatest strength was its adaptability, its ability to think under pressure, and its determination to overcome any obstacle. By the time the final puzzle appeared, Val was exhausted, her mind stretched thin from the intense focus required. But she refused to give up. She had come this far. She wasn't about to let a single puzzle defeat her. The final challenge was a test of logic and reasoning. It was a riddle, a question that seemed impossible to answer. But Val didn't hesitate. She saw through the complexity, found the simple truth at the heart of it, and quickly entered her answer. A loud chime rang through the hall, signaling the end of the trial. Val stood, breathless, as the Shervin judge looked over their results. For a long moment, there was silence. Finally, the judge spoke. "Captain Valerius Stone of Earth, you have passed the first trial." Val let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She had done it. The first step was complete, but she knew this was only the beginning. There were 2 more trials to face, and the Shervins would not make it easy. If anything, they would only get harder from here. As she left the platform, Val caught the eye of the Supreme Matron. The young alien's gaze was cold, calculating, but there was something else in her eyes, too. A glimmer of respect. And that was something Val would take with her into the next trial. The second trial came faster than Val had anticipated. The first trial, the combat of wits, had been a mental challenge, and Val had emerged victorious. But it had left her exhausted. She had been tested in ways she had never imagined, and though she had won, she knew the Shervins were watching her closely. Now, the second trial was about to begin. Val stood at the edge of a vast chamber, the walls towering high above her. The room was unlike any she had seen before. The floor was covered in a smooth, reflective surface, and soft. Ethereal lights hung from the ceiling, casting shadows on the intricate carvings that decorated the walls. The air was cool, and the scent of something unfamiliar lingered, a sweet, floral fragrance that made the atmosphere feel both calming and eerie at the same time. In the center of the room was a raised platform, and on that platform stood a young Shervin female. She was tall, her deep blue skin shimmering in the soft light, and her long hair flowed like liquid silver around her shoulders. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, were fixed on Val as she entered the room. "I am Syrah," Shervin said, her voice smooth, but with a clear edge of authority. "I will be your partner for the second trial. You will face me in the arena of understanding." Val studied her closely. Syrah was younger than the Supreme Matron, but clearly no less formidable. There was something about her demeanor, something that suggested she didn't agree entirely with the traditions of her people. It was a hint of rebellion in the way she held herself, as if she didn't want to be here at least not in the way the Shervin leaders expected. "The arena of understanding?" Val repeated, raising an eyebrow. "What's that?" Syrah's lips curled slightly into a smirk. "You'll find out soon enough." The two of them walked to the platform in the center of the room. As they reached it, the floor beneath their feet began to shift. A holographic display appeared in the air between them, showing a series of complex, ever-changing images. The images were of different landscapes, from lush forests to barren deserts, from oceans to cities. This trial is not about strength, Sira explained. It's about understanding. You will be shown a series of images, places, people, and events that are important to the Shervan culture. Your task is to interpret them. Understand their meaning, their significance, and then explain them to me. You must show me that you can see beyond the surface, that you can understand the depths of our culture. Val looked at the display. It was both overwhelming and fascinating. The images were unlike anything she had ever seen: strange symbols, alien creatures, and unfamiliar landscapes. They were not just pictures. They were windows into an entire way of life, a culture so different from her own that it felt almost impossible to comprehend. You will be judged by your ability to understand the deeper meaning behind each image, Sira continued. There is no right or wrong answer. What matters is your perspective, your ability to see things through the eyes of a Shervan. Val took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. She had faced many challenges in her life, battles, wars, and even diplomatic negotiations. But this was different. This was not just about logic or combat. It was about empathy, about truly understanding another culture. It was a test of her humanity. The first image appeared. It was a picture of a young Shervan female standing alone on a rocky cliff, gazing out at a vast, stormy sea. Her posture was regal, but there was a sadness in her eyes. The winds ruffled her hair, and the sky was dark and foreboding. Val studied the image carefully, trying to find the deeper meaning. She noticed the girl's expression, the sadness in her eyes and the way. She seemed to be looking for something in the distance. The stormy sea symbolized turmoil, and the solitary figure seemed to suggest isolation or loneliness. This image represents the coming Vaj trials of our species, Val said, her voice steady but thoughtful. The storm is a symbol of the challenges that we must face in order to ascend to power. The young female stands alone because she must face these challenges on her own. But the sadness in her eyes tells me that the process is not without sacrifice. It's a journey of strength, but it also comes with a great deal of personal cost. Sira was silent for a moment, her gaze intense. And what else? She asked. Val hesitated, then added, it also suggests that leadership comes with a price. This Shervan is looking for something, perhaps understanding or wisdom, something that can only be found through hardship. The storm may symbolize both the external and internal struggles that she must overcome. Sira nodded slowly. Interesting, she said, her voice thoughtful. You see more than the surface. The storm is indeed a symbol of struggle, but it also represents the unknown, the unpredictable nature of our trials. And you are right, the loneliness is part of the process. The young ones must learn to stand alone before they can lead. The next image appeared. A group of Shervans gathered together in a circle, their hands raised toward the sky. There was a sense of unity in the image, but also a kind of tension. The Shervans were focused, their eyes locked on something unseen above them. The atmosphere was heavy, charged with energy. Val studied the scene. The unity was clear, but there was a subtle sense of anticipation, as if they were waiting for something to happen. This looks like a ritual of some kind, Val said. Perhaps a gathering before an important event, something that requires unity and focus. The raised hands suggest a connection to something beyond themselves, maybe a higher power or a greater purpose. Sira looked at her with approval. Yes, this is a sacred ritual of our people. It represents the moment when we come together to offer our collective strength to the future. It is a moment of unity and purpose, but also of uncertainty. We do not know what the future holds, but we are ready to face it together. Val nodded, understanding the deeper meaning. It's a symbol of hope, then. A hope that through unity, they can overcome whatever challenges the future holds. Sira's eyes flickered with something like respect. Yes, she said softly. That is part of it. The next images came faster, one after the other, each a new challenge, a new test of Val's understanding. She began to see the patterns, to recognize the deeper themes that ran through the Shervan culture. There were images of sacrifice, of strength, of unity, and of wisdom. Each one had its own story to tell, its own lesson to impart. Finally, after what felt like hours, the last image appeared. It was a simple Wana, solitary figure standing at the edge of a great chasm, looking out over the void. The figure was small, insignificant in the face of the vastness before them. But there was a sense of determination in the way they stood, as if they knew that the only way forward was through the unknown. Val's heart skipped a beat. She knew this image. It was a symbol of humanity. Of all the struggles they had faced, all the obstacles they had overcome, humans, like the figure in the image, were small in the grand scheme of the universe. But they were not afraid of the unknown. They would step forward into the void. With the same determination that had carried them through every trial, the final image. Val said softly, her voice full of conviction. This is the moment of choice. The moment when we stand on the edge of everything we know, ready to take the next step into the unknown. It's about courage, about facing the future with determination, no matter how uncertain it may be. Syrah nodded. You understand more than I expected, she said, her tone almost admiring. Val looked up at her, meeting her gaze. I understand because we are not so different, you and I. We both face the unknown. We both fight for a future we cannot yet see. But that is what makes us strong. The room was silent for a long moment, and Val felt a strange sense of connection with Syrah. Despite their differences, despite the vast cultural gap that separated them, they shared something fundamental, a desire to survive, to grow, to understand the universe around them. Finally, Syrah spoke. You have passed the second trial, Captain Stone. Val exhaled, relieved but also deeply moved by the experience. The second trial had been about more than just understanding the Shervan culture. It had been about finding common ground between two species, two worlds. And Val knew that if she could continue to build these bridges, humanity would have a place among the stars. The final trial was approaching, and Val stood before the towering gates of the Shervan Palace, her mind focused and her body weary. The first two trials had been grueling, but they had only prepared her for the challenge ahead. This last trial would determine whether humanity could truly join the galactic community, or whether they would be cast aside as a lesser species. Val had earned the respect of many of the Shervans through her wit, her understanding, and her strength. But the final trial wasn't going to be about intellect or cultural understanding, it would be about survival. And Val knew that survival in this case meant navigating the most complex of situations. The politics of the Shervan court. She had seen how the Shervan matriarchs wielded their power. Their world was ruled by tradition, by strength, and by strict order. But Val had learned enough about their society to know that there was something more to the Shervans than just their rigid customs. There were cracks in their system, weaknesses that could be exploited. And she, Captain Valeria Stone, was going to find them. The trial began in the grand hall of the palace, where the Shervan court had gathered. The supreme matron, the powerful leader of the Shervan people, stood at the center of the room, flanked by her council of matriarchs. The atmosphere was thick with tension, as if the very walls of the palace were holding their breath. Val was led to a raised platform in the center of the room, where the matriarchs would judge her final performance. The floor beneath her feet shimmered with a strange energy, the air charged with anticipation. She could feel the weight of their gaze, her expectations bearing down on her. The supreme matron's voice echoed through the hall, cold and commanding. Captain Valeria Stone, you stand before us today not only as humanity's representative, but as a test of your species' true worth. This final trial will not be decided by logic or intellect. It will be decided by your ability to navigate the complexities of power, diplomacy, and survival. Val nodded, her expression steely. She had been preparing for this moment since the very first trial. She had studied the Shervans' culture, their history, and their politics. She had made allies, and she had learned the secret struggles of the Shervan people. But now, it was time to put everything she had learned to the test. The trial is simple, the supreme matron continued. You will be presented with a series of challenges, each designed to test your ability to influence, persuade, and manipulate the balance of power. You will face the council in a debate, and only by securing your position will you win. Fail, and humanity will never rise above the status of a lesser species. Val took a deep breath. The stakes couldn't be higher. One wrong move, and humanity's future would be sealed. But Val wasn't going to fail. She wasn't going to let her people down. The first challenge was a debate. Val was placed before the council, each matriarch eyeing her with cold detachment. They were ready for her to make a mistake, to stumble under the pressure. But Val was ready. She had prepared for this moment. The supreme matron raised her hand, signaling the beginning of the debate. "Captain Stone," she began, her voice sharp, "our people have long believed in the strength of our traditions. But you come here, offering nothing more than the ideas of a young species. You seek to join us, to claim a place at our table. But what can humanity offer that we do not already possess?" Val's eyes locked onto the supreme matron's, her voice calm and steady. "What humanity offers is adaptability. You've lived for centuries under the same traditions, the same system. But that system is flawed. It's rigid. It's unwilling to change. And that's where humanity comes in. We've survived because we innovate, because we adapt to whatever the universe throws at us. We don't rely on the past, we move forward." The room was silent, the council members exchanging glances. The supreme matron's face remained impassive, but Val could see a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She had planted the seed of doubt, and that was enough. But the matriarchs weren't done. The next challenge was even more difficult. Val was presented with a dilemma, a choice between two paths, each with its own set of consequences. One path would benefit humanity, but it would come at a cost to the Shervins. The other path would benefit the Shervins, but it would be a blow to humanity's future. The room grew tense as Val weighed the options. She could feel the eyes of the council on her, watching her every move. The fate of her people hung in the balance. Val thought back to everything she had learned about the Shervins. She remembered their pride, their strength, and their fear of change. She also remembered the quiet rebellion she had seen in Syrah's eyes, the young Shervin, who had begun to question her species' rigid traditions. Val knew that the Shervins were not a monolithic race. They were a people on the brink of something new, something that could change the course of their history. If only they could see it. With that in mind, Val made her decision. She chose the path that would benefit the Shervins, even at the cost of humanity's immediate gain. She spoke with conviction, her voice firm but respectful. "The future of both our species depends on cooperation. If we continue to focus only on our own advancement, we will fail. But if we invest in each other, if we help each other grow, then the future will belong to all of us." There was a long silence as the council members absorbed her words. The supreme matron looked at Val, her gaze unreadable. Val held her ground, refusing to back down. She had made her choice, and she wasn't going to let the Shervins dictate humanity's future. Finally, the supreme matron spoke. "Your answer is unexpected, Captain Stone, but it is wise." Val let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The first challenge was over, and it had been won. The final challenge was a test of diplomacy. Val was tasked with negotiating a peace treaty between two factions within the Shervin court. Factions that had been at odds for centuries. The task seemed impossible, but Val knew it was her final test. If she could navigate this delicate situation, humanity would have earned its place in the galaxy. The factions were stubborn, each one refusing to give an inch. But Val had learned enough about the Shervins to know that their pride was their greatest weakness. She approached the negotiations carefully, speaking with each faction's leader privately before the official talks began. She listened to their grievances, their fears, and their hopes. She found the common ground between them, the things that united them rather than divided them. When the negotiations began, Val stood before the council, her voice calm and measured. She spoke of unity, of the strength that came from working together rather than tearing each other apart. She appealed to their shared history, their shared desire for progress. It wasn't easy. There were moments when it seemed like the factions might tear each other apart, but Val held firm. She listened, she reasoned, and she found a way forward. Slowly, the tension in the room began to ease. And by the end of the negotiations, a treaty had been signed, a treaty that would bring peace to the Shervan people and, by extension, to humanity. The Supreme Matron stood, her eyes fixed on Val. "You have passed the final trial, Captain Stone," she said, her voice soft but full of respect. "Humanity has proven itself worthy of a place among the stars." Val smiled, her heart swelling with pride. She had done it. Humanity had done it. They had earned their place in the galaxy. Not through force or dominance, but through diplomacy, wisdom, and the unwavering belief that cooperation was the key to the future. As Val left the hall, she glanced up at the stars above. The journey had only just begun, but humanity had taken its first step toward greatness. And with that, Val knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, humanity would face them together, with strength, with unity, and with the knowledge that they were capable of anything.